All right, so I just did a presentation on GK Sierra and talking about how potentially one of the models for their operatives could be to blend actors in as gamers to perform, soft kill and other types of operations. So, what is a soft kill? Well, basically, a soft kill is kind of like it's an electrical arc, and so I can kind of show you some slides to show you what like an electrical arc typically looks like because it'll, kind of show you like a you can see the electricity. It looks a little bit like a lightning bolt kind of crossing between two parts. Well, the arc, if you think about it, is just, an electrical field's coming from one point on the left and one's coming from the point on the right. And because they're doing something similar, they meet in the middle and create the arc, right? So the point is that what these people seem to be doing is potentially creating communities or buildings or areas where they're sort of like a trap of sorts, where if they want to have a person they want to perform a soft kill on, they'll try to get them into one of these areas that's hived into a larger DAS campus system or DAS system inside a single building. I mean, it could be something as simple as one room or an entire community or just one apartment complex or even just one room of an apartment or house. It's a lot of different ways this can happen, but the reason I'm concerned is because the people that seem to be doing this seem to openly signal that they're doing their own Auschwitz, but they're doing it with electricity and they call it Arkowitz. And so I've seen this multiple times on Reddit boards and other things. So it's concerning enough to me. And because I have experienced some things myself, I want to talk about it. And by the way, in my last article, I said something about how I was trying to explain the technology about how it could be working. I'm still researching that. And so for the record, I am experiencing it. I'm just not a person who knows how to transmit it. So when I tell you that I don't know from firsthand experience, all I'm trying to explain to you is that no one's ever trained me how to create an electrical arc using ham radio bands. And so in order for me to find out how it's happening, I have to sort of reverse engineer it. But if this helps you understand how close the issue is to me, I'll show you the pictures of my scars. And basically, when these systems are hitting you, and they are hitting me, even at the moment, very hard, depending on how close you get to the signal source, it can create an electrical arc across the pinky and the middle fingers of both of your hands. And I'm consistent with that. So I know about these types of things only because in the wireless industry, there's such a thing called an RF burn, a radio frequency burn. And it happens because, you accidentally hold on to a powered up amplified coax that hasn't been terminated, meaning it's not plugged in. And so it's amplifying a high power signal, and maybe you touch it against some power, and that creates an arc, and then you get a scar that's called an RF burn sometimes. It's because it'll go through central points inside your nerves. So, it's pretty consistent with that. So I just wanted to share that with you. So yeah, obviously I'm motivated to find out what's happening here. So I've been kind of doing research, trying to determine how might this be happening. And I do have a lot of slides I can show you. I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as I can here. But I define a soft kill personally as like a slow, silent, nearly undetectable combination of covert electromagnetic weapons and psychological warfare, which is like a form of PSYOPS, deception games, confidence games. And they do this by manipulating the perceptions of their target. They use spheres of influence as the model. I'll show you that slide. It's just, it's really basic. I mean, it's not that complicated, guys. When you're, ladies and gentlemen, sorry. When you're doing this, and when they're doing this to somebody, they're surrounding that person and trying to manipulate every aspect of their perceptions to tell them that the situation is hopeless, they're completely isolated, and nobody wants to have anything to do with them. That's really the goal. And I know that seems strange, but it's like once you understand how technology plays a role in creating this perception, you'll grasp what's going on here. And I'm going to take you through the hardware pieces and everything through that here shortly. Um, so the reason they do this is because once they've got all of your perceptions managed and people have effectively isolated and given up on you, then that allows them to sort of create narratives surrounding your reputation, because now you're isolated, you're not in regular communication with people. Now the hardware parts kicks in, and now you can kind of understand how they can take control of your life without even you knowing it. And while this is happening, let me put it this way: like they get people in a lot of different ways, from what I've seen and I've experienced. Some they trick you into like saying that they can provide you maybe with a place to stay if you'll help take care of a disabled person. So you're like exchanging, taking care of somebody in exchange for that, and then you find out that the person's not actually disabled. They're actually running, some radionics, and it's just another way to gain your confidence. They have a team of pro actors that train people how to be, not pro actors, but professional actors, that they train to do this, and they can stay on standby because they work in both the entertainment industry, and sometimes they're volunteers at the fire department to gain their access to these radionics. And there's a lot of different ways the ecosystem works, but I don't want to get too deep into that. But and I don't want to take the emphasis off that they use elderly sometimes to do this, or they do honeypot type scenarios, confidence games. They have a lot of, because it's an acting community, they have a lot of attractive men and women that they can kind of run honeypot scenarios, on the opposite genders. There's a lot of different ways that they gain the confidence of the person to get them into the place that they're trying to get them to. But the point is to set the conditions through which the target will want to come to their central location, where they will be hived into what's called a DAS, or a distributed antenna system. So getting into that, one of the things that I've noticed is that there seems to be some specific hardwares that they're choosing, and I'm not going to suggest to you that the people who make this are behind whatever's happening. It's just that they seem to be using a combination of, and not exclusively this, but of Solid Technologies distributed antenna system hardware, specifically Alliance and series equipment. And they seem to be putting an emphasis on what's called a Titan amplifier. And that's relevant to me as a person that used to do in-building work and engineering work, because that's a very high-watt amplifier that's usually designed for like outdoor systems, meaning 20 watts would be the kind of power settings that you would have if you were trying to send a signal, repeat a signal down a long highway, for example. So they're using these for in-building scenarios, which says to me that they need to have enough power to send that signal through multiple buildings across a DAS system, which would be like the campus distributed antenna system, like I'll show you in the diagrams. So why is that relevant? Because, well, they call, the same company has this other thing called Safe Buildings Coalitions. And so I got thinking about this a little bit. Well, what if these people, their definition of safe was getting people that they don't like or their political enemies into that safe building, quote unquote, not saying that's what Solid does or that's their motivation, but, if this were the model, then it would be important for them to be able to get people in a central location, because they can economize everything, you see. And if the building has been pre-wired for it, and as a quote-unquote safe building according to their records, then yeah, these will have pre-wired or reconfigured wiring that'll interact with the hardware that'll integrate these amplifiers, these distributed antenna systems, and things like that. So now, the reason why that should concern you is because basically what these DAS systems can do is they can be concealed or they can be out in the open. So I know this from my job experience, because I used to do ones that are out in the open. It was my job. These are ones that people requested. These are nothing nefarious. Regular in-building systems are designed just to improve coverage where you can't get it normally. So what these people are doing is taking that good concept that normally does nice things for people, and they're just like weaponizing it to where they take that same system that should improve coverage and they just use it to trap coverage. You see what I'm saying? So that when you walk into one of their buildings, that now you're inside their DAS system. Now you are in their trap. You are not going to be able to use your cell phone without it going through that DAS system before moving on to the cell phone network. And so they do that by integrating what's called like an e-femto cell. You might have seen an episode, if you follow the show Mr. Robot. They had an episode that involved an e-femto cell. I think it's in season 2. There's this whole elaborate setup where they place one of these in an FBI office to capture their traffic. And so I just wanted people to know that that's actually a concept that could technically, I'm not saying that one in there did or does, but that is something that's possible on a technical level, which kind of impressed me about the show at the time, is that these people are able to mimic what are called e-femto cells or network extenders, hook them into, as a signal source, hook them into what's called the distributed antenna system, or DAS, and these are manufactured by companies like Solid Technologies. And then once you run them through a series of these Alliance series, conditioner cards and these 20-watt amplifiers, you can now extend that signal to an entire area. So say, for example, they wanted to capture everything at a mall and all the apartment buildings surrounding it. They would just install a campus DAS, and then they would have these e-femto cells that were set up at their target locations to where it was capturing all of the cell phone traffic and everything else like that. So they could do that a couple different ways. They could either actually have a real e-femto cell hooked into it as a signal source, and another way they could be potentially doing it is by using graphics cards, which have pretty amazing capabilities nowadays, and reconfiguring them as a transmit and receive signal source that basically mimics a cell site and is able to plug right into the system. So again, this is based on some research, and I have actually measured some strange anomalous signals. So I am speaking in kind of general terms, but I do have data that I've collected about this. So anyways, So the point is that since these operatives consist mostly of non-military actors, occultists, I mean really a lot of occultists that I've identified. You know, again, I'm speaking to you somewhat from personal experience with some of these people, but I don't know that they're specifically GK as it were, but I know that the people that do this is their methodology. And I do have evidence to suggest that some of these people are actors that have actually been in some films and television series and use different names than they do in their daily lives as those actors. And some of these people have radio frequency and wireless industry training, which makes it even more troubling because that means they basically have two careers, and one is being concealed. And the one that's being concealed is pretty significant work experience when it comes to doing targeted radio frequency like brain entrainment or directed energy weapons or point to target microwave, because sometimes all these people are doing is taking like the concepts of microwave engineering, which involves point-to-point communications. That's like a good thing, you know, like you would you know, if you're trying to get it from a cell tower back to a central office, you would use a microwave path, you know. But what these people do is they take that one side of the microwave path and they just aim it at a target, you know, so that it uses that frequency and just slow cooks them. Because, you know, if a person stands in front of radio frequency long enough, yeah, it'll just they'll evaporate, kind of, you know. It just slow cooks you. It's not the same as like radiation from a nuclear reservation that's ionizing. It's just radio frequency is just it heats up your body tissue, and if they pulse it, it can electrically arc you. Yeah, and it can shock you, basically, give you like a low volt tasing type sensation. And so the internal operatives, you know, they use covers, you know, and because they're actors, they can fake being blind, deaf, autistic, or something like that, or they can develop an elaborate storyline that integrates their occult work into it. I mean, it's pretty disturbing once you start peeling back the layers, okay? And that's just one of the many confidence games they've established, is faking disability. And I do have evidence that there's a specific organization that actually specializes in this, and they've named their company a pun that basically implies that they train people to fake disability specifically for psychological warfare operations and as confidence games and to slow people down. And that those same people that are part of those operations, that's their cover. And they're able to get it through a Department of Justice hack, and it's potentially through the Computer Hacking and Intellectual Property Division and InfraGard, that allows them basically to take on another personality and pretend to be a completely different person with credentials, paperwork, and everything to back it up. So that's a little disturbing to me that there's that exploit that exists. So the point is that once they get one of these actors and they have all the hardware and everything like that, and it's installed inside the building with a DAS, once the target moves in, they can now access everything, because, you know, you move in, you know, you just trust that when you plug your power in, you know, that you're just getting power, right? Well, not in these houses, not in these apartments, because when you go into these places, they've installed something called Ethernet over power, where when you plug in your cell phone, you think you're just getting power, but what it's actually doing is it's backing up your phone like it would if you plugged it into your laptop, because your wall outlet is not just a wall outlet, it's Ethernet over power, meaning it's going to go back to a central PC or server that's going to back your phone up into what's called a ROM file or a mirror, or it's going to take a mirror of your laptop if you have it plugged in long enough. And let's face it, most people need to get battery at some point, you know, juice backed up and everything, so it's going to happen, and then they got your mirror image. So you can see what happens is that once you spend a little time inside this building, they basically own your entire life. They got your passwords, your emails, your text messages. They got every part of your life. As hackers say, they own you, you know. And they can now mimic your financial sites. They can steal your logins, because you're not getting to see the internet as it truly is. It's being run through their DAS. It's like a proxy server. So everything that you think you're doing it's going directly to the internet. They're running through either separate conduit that's going to send it through their hardware before it moves on to the internet, or they have some type of wireless hack that's going to intercept whatever you're doing before it can move on to the network. They typically will do this hardwired, and I can show you an example of like what happens if somebody tries to install some conduit nearby. You know, there's all kinds of different ways to reroute a person's traffic, because typically the people that are behind this, they'll gain ownership over the building or the management, and then that gives them access to be able to make changes in authorization to make, you know, the maintenance changes, rewire certain things. And I'll show you a little bit of an example of what that looks like too. So, but getting more back to how this all works, basically, once you're inside that DAS system and they have you in the eFemto cell, they'll then integrate what's called, and it's not always this exact device, but it's called a Harris Stingray. And there's something that can basically, they're sold to law enforcement so they can monitor text messages in and out and all the different phone calls from a select cell tower. But the people that are selling this equipment, they'll sell it to both law enforcement and they'll sell it to criminals. They don't care. And I guess they must see it as that, they're creating problems, and that they have people that they can sell it to solve those problems. So as the dealer of all the wireless equipment, they don't seem to care. So I don't know. That's just something I've heard. Now, when I looked into Solid Technologies, I kind of found some connections to this guy, Seth Buckley, which frankly kind of sounds like an InfraGard name, frankly. It actually sounds like they're combining a few different people's names into one and creating a separate personality, but I need to do more research to prove if that's the case. But when I tracked the address down, I was really surprised to learn that Solid Technologies, which has been a pretty large in-building system manufacturer, amplifiers and that type of thing, fiber optic paths, that they were based in, of all places. Now again, I need somebody to verify this to see if this record system's lying to me, but said that it was in Winston, Oregon, near Roseburg. And so when I zoomed in on that address out there, I was like, well, wow, look at this. It's this neighborhood, and it looks like they were able to name the streets because right next to this guy that sells this type of equipment is a road called Kangaroo Court. Now, I got to tell you, knowing that a person designs these types of systems and they claim that they're part of a Safer Buildings Coalition that's for public safety people and is allegedly selling to municipalities and other groups, for them to place their business headquarters and main address for the equipment next to a road called Kangaroo Court, which those are not from the United States or may be unfamiliar with the colloquialism, it means that you're being framed, you're being set up, you're being lied about, and they're intentionally, quote unquote, railroading you, which means, just to, they're lying about you to get you locked up to where you don't get a fair trial, or what some of the Germans like to call an Unrechtsstaat, meaning an unright state. It means a state of injustice where injustice is expected. And by the way, one of the people that may be connected to GK Sierra seems to brag openly that they're creating an Unrechtsstaat, so I thought that was worth noting. So there's other aspects of this that are going to tie back to people have historically made reference to a looking glass. And if you notice that Looking Glass is near Highway 42 out in Winston, Oregon and Green, Oregon. I don't want to get into that right now. I'll cover it on another topic. But yes, for those who are familiar with my other interviews, you must know how those stories parallel. But just so you know, I think that that's kind of a psyop from that group, just so and I'll explain that later. But let's get into technical specs, because I want to talk about the hardware that's being used. It seems like beyond the DAS, that you have some graphics cards and PC parts that involve RAM upgrades, modules, and a high-end graphics card. Typically, I see them reference oftentimes the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080 or 1070 Founders, TI, and Titan edition. So if you recall from before, I talked about how there's a solid Titan series 20-watt amplifier. I think there may be some interactions that whoever's doing this, they may have developed script files or something that mirrors or matches these two, or marries these parts together in a way that, to where a person would just, they knew if they buy a Titan card, a Titan amplifier, and all these other things, and then run a Titan software program, that it'll work. Because you have to remember, these are designed for non-technical professionals and actors and actresses, so they're going to try to find things that are as simple as possible to reference. And so when you add into that an abundance of programming available that claims to be Titan this and Titan that, it starts to become a little bit more coincidental, and you start realizing that one of their methodologies is that they pass data using streaming video and audio, and I'll get into that topic another time. But the point is that these graphics cards have a lot of different capabilities, right? And this is kind of where it gets sinister, because they really are kind of an all-encompassing kind of PSYOP device if used improperly. Now, what they're designed for is like, this one in particular is designed to do like VR, virtual reality lab environments, where a person can wear like those helmets and stay inside the VR lab and walk around in a VR lab. And they can offer that in like 4K processing, high definition video. So it's really designed for people that have high-end monitors that do 4K signal processing, that do special effects, that do face swap technology of more of a filmmaking or amateur filmmaking design, but they can create very hyper realistic looking digital evidence, meaning that if they wanted to create perceptions on top of everything else that a person was doing something that they weren't, they could do it easily with this technology that kind of integrates concepts of face swap and video processing using what is called the ARC, which is the Advanced Rendering Center division of NVIDIA, and the DICE, which isn't that interesting that it's ARC and DICE and that there's a character named Mark Dice. So I thought that was worth noting. But back to the hardware here. The cards that I've seen are capable of being signal generators. So what that means to me in the wireless industry is that I'm looking at this graphics card just thinking that it's doing regular graphics processing, but as a signal person who's used to dealing with radio frequency, I kind of look in there and go, oh, wait a second, the boost clock, the memory clock, all these things are showing that they have signals that are in the megahertz range or the gigahertz range of frequencies that I used to work with, And so that, of course, piques my interest, because if I see that there's a boost clock that runs, however many megahertz, and I notice that those many megahertz, that frequency band is also being used by AWS service, which is used for high-speed, 4G wireless data. It's kind of interesting because it kind of reinforces the idea that if a graphics card is capable of being a signal generator and passing all these different bands from, the low megahertz range all the way up to, 10 plus gigahertz, then it kind of has built into it all the graphics, as a graphics card, it also has all the abilities to mimic a signal generator. And then when you add into that some of them are named Titan, and that there's Titan 20-watt amplifiers, and that these amplifiers are multi-channel amplifiers, what that means to the layman out there is that these cards can pass multiple different frequencies, multiple different bands into these amplifiers, and then those amplifiers will re-radiate them, meaning they'll amplify them and send them through whatever antenna this person selects. So that could be used for telecommunications purposes. That's what they were used in my in-building system performance group. When I was there, those are the type of systems we installed, where the antenna functioned as a cell signal, right? Okay, if I have my phone inside this place, I can make a cell signal better, a cell call better. But what these people do is they have hacks in that will go into the power grid, and they have in-wall antennas in some cases installed that will just send dirty electricity and magnetic resonance and magnetic fields and electrical fields into the room, to where it has an arcing effect and basically sends a low volt tasing signal to their target. This happens to me, actually. It's happening to me as I'm recording this, just so you know. I'm used to it now, okay? But no, it's very uncomfortable. It's extremely painful at times. They can target specific parts of your body, like I'm a man, so they target my testicles frequently, or they'll target my throat. These are designed to send, I believe, messages, And again, guys, I wish I could tell you that this was something that I'm just saying, but I feel it, okay? I've measured signals, I've taken magnetic resonance readings, and I can share those with people in another presentation. But these are real systems that are happening, and it seems to be the way they're working, is arcing a person as a method of low volt tasing. And it seems to me that these graphics cards have all the abilities to do it, because while they're inside the PC, they're also plugged into this 60 hertz signal source. And so if they operate at 60 hertz, and 60 hertz is what your electricity is operating at, they can generate a signal through it. Then this kind of would explain the bridge to the external operatives that have vehicles that pull up, right? Because that's basically designed to add another signal source in to amplify the power, or to play hot potato with the signals if anybody's researching it, right? So if you think about it, a person with a graphics card on the inside, they would just be sending a signal to a specific outlet. So say they're in room 1, they would send that signal to room 2 where their target is. Now the person from Hammer, or one of these similar types of ops that are doing ham radio, would park outside. They would know to aim their antenna at the window of bedroom 2 to match the signal that's being generated from the PC in room 1, you see? And that's how I think they're creating the arc, potentially. But again, this is based on some signal measurements, but I need to have more sophisticated equipment to definitively define these things. So I'm not prepared to tell you every single signal and everything, but just to let you know, I have created, or rather I have lots of slides to prove that there's electrical fields, magnetic fields, and I show you what they look like next to the signal sources. So that's relevant because it seems like water heaters are being integrated into the systems, and they use these parts called watt.com, and I've seen this on more than one system, and it's this blue ring that stays on the top, and then it seems like there's a hack into the water heater, but because I'm not a plumber or an electrician, I don't really know the precise mechanisms of how they're doing it, except that it just looks anomalous to me. And whenever I'm experiencing a low volt tase, I can bring my test equipment back to the water heater where all these parts are and measure very strong magnetic resonance and magnetic fields and electrical fields exceeding the levels of extremely dangerous. Meaning, I believe 500 nanotesla is the measurement for safety on a magnetic field, and I can sometimes max the meter out by putting it near some of these devices that I think are the signal sources or the walls, and sometimes like from the wall I'm getting around 1,000, or sometimes it'll even max out the meter at over 2,000 nanotesla. So it's pretty serious, and again, I can show you my electrical arc burns to prove that it does happen. So that's relevant because in addition to that, all those capabilities, the one thing I have not mentioned to you yet is that these cryptocurrency companies, this is their core hardware, is NVIDIA graphics cards. This is what they use to do their mining operations. This is what every company that has a exchange is using. They're using NVIDIA graphics cards. So in addition to being capable of being a signal generator, e-femtocell, being used to create digital evidence, face swap technology, now you add in cryptocurrency into it. It seems like it's an all-encompassing geek device to do a lot of nefarious activities if a person isn't being monitored carefully, So getting back to the software, I'm going to cover more of these topics in detail. I'm just trying to give you more of a broad overview here. But the software platforms that I'm noticing that they're using is, as far as the gaming goes, has a strong emphasis on Steam by Valve Corporation. They're a company based in Bellevue, Washington. That's interesting to me because the city of Bellevue, where Steam by Valve Corporation is located, has a pretty extensive distributed antenna system project that they did and partnered with Solid Technologies on. So it kind of seems like less of a coincidence that all these groups are working together. And because I happen to know somebody that had a relationship with the city of Bellevue, I happen to know somebody that seems to be using Steam by Valve Corporation software in great deal. I also seem to know people that have exploits into energy grids, potentially. The marriage of all these coincidences just don't feel very coincidental, but I'm willing to sidestep that topic for the time being. But the point is that the software by by Valve Corporation also has a connection to this term Nexus. All right, and I want to get into that in more detail here really quick, and I'll go into further detail later. But the point is that Nexus is like a common word that they're using. Okay. And the first thing they do is that in Steam by Valve Corporation, there's a company or a group called Nexus Mods. Well, I noticed that there's some strange anomalies with those mods. Is a lot of times they're just like voice files or face files, or you know what I'm saying? And so it occurred to me that this is probably the way they're doing face swap and creating digital evidence or faking people's voices to the people they're doing this to. Is they just blend it in the gaming environment, download the Nexus mod file, and it has the person's voice that is going to be the target or whoever they're trying to fool. So say if somebody wants to pretend to be like, I don't know, a relative like your uncle or aunt or something like that, they could easily just do it by having a small sample of that person's voice as a Nexus mod file. Then they add it into their gaming environment, and so the person just sits there, pretending that they're on their controller playing a game and that they're talking to a friend or something like that, but they could actually be creating a disinformation clip, and you wouldn't have any clue because they're blending it into the background, you see. And they're using a graphics card. It just seems like they're playing a video game. You understand? And it's not just that. It's that I started noticing that there's a Nexus Valve company that offers these parts that say watt.com. There's a Nexius that does installation of in-building systems like this that are incapable of arcing a person electrically. And then once I followed that company back, guess where it wound up? Guess where I found Nexius? At Leidos. And Leidos is spun off from SAIC, which is Science Applications International Corporation, and now we're back to Bob Baester and his troubling history, and we're back to how all this connects to the Department of Energy, the Mission Alliance, potentially, because, Alliance parts, Alliance amplifiers, Titan parts, Titan amplifiers. I don't know if these are just exploits that somebody else determined and they thought that they would add in, as naming conventions, or if it was always part of it, or maybe it's just a coincidence, it could be any of those, but once you start seeing how all these things tie together and the way they seem to be interacting, it won't seem like much of a coincidence. And I think I'm going to end it there for now. But what I'm going to do is keep in mind some of the naming conventions. I'm going to get into more esoteric data probably in the next series, because a lot of the people that are involved with this are occultists, okay? And I'm trying to separate that material, because I know that some people see the word Nazi or occultist and they freak out. You know, it's sort of like nobody wants to come near certain words. They're like buzzwords. Look, you know, I'm not going to tell you they're all Nazis or even occultists necessarily, but there's a thread and a pattern of this Nazi occultism that seems to be within these groups. And if it is connected to these folks, I don't know. You know, I'm just saying might be a way that it could be done, you know. And because there seems to be patterns right in front of me that indicate that this is how it's done, you know, I at least have to share it with people in the most respectful way that I can without assumption of guilt. It's just that, you know, I'm seeing these things and I am measuring them with a signal meter. You know, I'm actually, and as cheap as my equipment is, my EM meter is about a $500 meter, so it's pretty decent as far as meters go for measuring EM fields, electromagnetic fields, just for the record. Some of my equipment's kind of cheap, but that one's a pretty decent meter altogether. So I don't know. I think this is worth looking into more. And when you combine this whole campus type scenario and the fact that it gives them the ability to send low volt tasers and arcs through the walls without a person knowing it, unless they have very sophisticated equipment to measure it, you know, you can see this is, if this model is being used in different places, you can see the how bad it could be. I just wanted you to think in terms of like what happens to your relatives when you send them to an elderly home. How do you know that somebody's not going to install a system like this that arcs them in the middle of the night just so they can accelerate their death? You don't know. And there's people that have that kind of cruelty, because the way these systems work is when the controller is tapped, it sends that signal to the wall and sends a low volt tase to the person. So a person can literally be sitting there playing a video game and having it blend in as a video game, but they're actually tasing a person in a separate room. And the way these systems are designed is that they can select which room, which apartment, which house. I mean, if it's a campus design, yeah, they can get right down to a node, an IP address, a radio number, and everything. Do you understand? And please trust me on this one when it comes to like the technical validation on it, is all I'm going to ask you. And if you want me to provide more slides, I'm not just going to tell you to trust me out of hat. I'm just going to say that just because I don't have every detail about how this works doesn't mean that it's not happening this way. I am feeling a low volt tasing here. This does seem to be happening. I've received reports from many other people that this is happening to them. And I'm just trying to understand, why is it allowed? And then it occurred to me that, yeah, they've developed some type of psychological warfare campaign on their targets to basically convince people on the outside that whoever this person is that they're doing it to deserves it. But if you knew what I knew about some of the people that were creating these programs and running these systems, you would be very disturbed that you've trusted their data sets. And that's about as much as I want to expand upon that at this moment, except to say that anybody who would like to have a personal conversation with me and any of these people in a secure environment with law enforcement, I'd be happy to do that if it's about security credentials and things like that, because this is too serious, guys. They could be putting these things into daycares, and then when you integrate VR lab environments into that, it gets super disturbing. You got to think about what these people are into, okay? It's very, I need you to really start taking some of these things seriously involving these systems, because they are creating their own Arkowitz. You know, it's their inside joke, okay? I see it in Reddit boards. It's on there. They're using computers, signal generators, intelligent transportation systems in cars, whole nother topic. A lot of different methodologies to create these low volt tasers, because they're extremely difficult to detect without the right kind of hardware. And after you do, try to complain about it. Try to report it. Try to inform somebody that this is happening, because that's what we're dealing with right now. It's so esoteric in nature, and it's not been officially discussed that nobody even knows where to go to tell. And the FCC, I don't know. Law enforcement, we're going to have to figure this out together, everybody. But these aren't happening to people under just circumstances, in case that's what people are under the illusion of. I'm sure some people may deserve to be low volt tased, but I can tell you that there's got to be a lot of people this is happening to who really don't deserve it. Okay? So that's all I'd like to say on that for now. I will be presenting more information on this, but I would encourage anybody from law enforcement or any intelligence agencies that want to have a private conversation with me about specifics and people that could potentially be involved with this. I do have a pretty extensive list, a lot of screenshots, a lot of slides, a lot of personal corroborative evidence that I can demonstrate to you that would lead you to the people potentially that could be doing this. So I would really appreciate a little bit more attention on it in regards to that, or at least for you to make some attempt to understand the technical concepts or reach out to me to explain them better to you if you don't. Thank you.